There is a very specific feeling that is almost exclusive to video games as a medium. A sense of grief or loss, a feeling very similar to post-nut clarity but less guilt and more depression. You ever beat a game and it just left you like? This feeling of emptiness upon game completion is what I like to call post-game depression. Whatever the opposite of what good head does to a motherfucker is a feeling of desolation and longing for more. But that's it, it's done. The game's over. That world you were lost in for the last couple days or weeks of your life, the world you were mesmerized by for every waking hour during the runtime of the game is no more. If you've been around in the gaming community for a while, then I'm sure you've heard the phrase, "I wish I could forget it and experience it all over again." Because you know, deep inside, you won't experience anything like it for a while, or maybe ever. This feeling is fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you see it, not very easy to come by. Despite my extensive gaming background, only a handful of games have ever left me with this feeling, for good reason. The best way to replicate that sense of loss is through immersion, and just generally getting the player attached to the world, whether it's through a well-written story, authentic characters that feel more real than the real thing, genius OST composition, and so on and so forth. A bad way to go about player immersion is through graphics. But graphical visual immersion is a very vital part of the shut the fuck up. While visual immersion is indeed a very important part of the player's immersion within a game, it's not the graphics that need to be good, it's the art style and general art direction that captivate the player. Everything past PS3 graphics is just a novelty. While ray tracing and in-game upscaling technology are very impressive, after a certain point it all looks the same. The average consumer won't be able to notice these minute details because they simply don't know what to look for. A usual good approach to visual immersion is making the game pleasing to the eye more than anything else, as that is what the player will spend the majority of the time looking at. Many of today's modern titles in their pursuit of hyper-realistic graphics end up all looking the same, repetitive, dull, and boring. A game's art direction should be as unique as possible in order to make the game as a whole feel as unique and memorable as possible. Memorabilia is a factor that plays into post-game depression. It's very important to leave the player with good memories, since it's the only thing left upon game completion. When you think of a memorable game, the first thing that comes to mind is probably the characters, the story, the lore, the gameplay. Well, I would personally argue that music is the most memorable aspect about a memorable game. I've gone through games I didn't like only for the music. I've dropped games that are good for the sole reason of having a lackluster soundtrack. So the way I see it, the presence of a good soundtrack can make or break entire games. Music in video games is genius. It does a lot more than just sound good or have something playing in the background to keep the player occupied during long sessions. Music in video games can tell a story, express differences and similarities between people, express feelings and emotions, establish scale and world setting. It's a very powerful tool that when used correctly can overpower all other forms of immersion and also establish very prominent memories within the minds of players. I could probably make an entire video covering this topic, but hey, no promises. Addiction and immersion go hand in hand with each other. As such, an addicting gameplay loop could be the main standout feature in a video game. Or another way of thinking about it, have the gameplay play into other aspects of game memorabilia. Spoilers for Drakengard 3. In the final boss fight, the game combines gameplay, music, and a visual art style different to the art style of the start of the game. Whether this rhythm boss fight approach was good or not is a topic I don't want to get into, but this is a segment most players would remember when looking back at this game. The frustrating and borderline unfair nature of the fight, coupled with, in my opinion, the only good thing this game had going for it, the music, undeniably makes for an unforgettable experience. Now allow me to set things straight. I didn't like this game, not because it was bad, well it was, but that's not why. The reason this game was very memorable for me was because of how good it could have been, rather than how it actually was. It had the makings of a great game just waiting to happen, so to me, it's a game that I look back on frustration and wish it was more. All that I have said so far can be reduced to a single word: feeling. Journey was a game that came out a while back. It is a game considered by many to be a walking sim masterpiece. Now for the people here that actually played the game, could you tell me what the game was about? Probably not, but now let me ask you this instead. What did playing Journey feel like? Almost all of you would be able to draw up an image in your heads on what it felt like playing Journey, even those of you who played it when it came out years ago like I did. The memories behind the game remain fresh and untouched. This is the result of the devs' care and attention in making sure the player is hooked, start to finish. Things like story, lore, or message can only be delivered properly when the player feels good about the game. No matter how incredible of a story you're trying to tell, if the player attachment to the world isn't there, it all becomes that much harder to tell a story or even deliver a message. Hyper immersion isn't the end-all be-all when it comes to video games. Not every game has to have an entirely new world built from scratch with a whole orchestra to work on the game's soundtrack. Oftentimes, minor changes to already existing formulas are much more consistent in achieving that player immersion. But fuck man, it's like porn. Once you get a taste, you can't stop, you need more. Ever since Nier Replicant, a game that I will suck the dick off till the end of time, a game so good that I couldn't get an erection for the next 3 weeks. Alright, it wasn't that good. But point is, it was a game that consumed my life for almost 2 months. A game that despite its glaring issues kept consistently hooking me deeper and deeper till I eventually didn't care about what was wrong with the game. Every time I thought to myself that it couldn't get any better, it just elevates higher and higher. It is the game that hit me the hardest. A game that left me with a certain sense of longing that unfortunately might never be satisfied. This for me was the epitome of post-game depression. Go ahead and let me know what games hit you the hardest in the comments. Unless it's one of these, you tasteless motherfucker.